All right, so we want to get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, an introduction to online inquiry-based learning. My name is Kiara Edwards, and I am the Director of Programs and Grants Management at MAA. So this webinar is clearly presented by MAA, and it's funded by the Paul R. and Virginia P. Halmos Fund. We're excited that everyone could attend. I know a lot of folks would have been gearing up for Math Fest right about now, in which we had to make the difficult decision to cancel due to the pandemic, but we're glad to be able to offer some virtual programming for everyone, especially those who are preparing for the fall semester. This is actually the first webinar to a series that we're launching this week. Tomorrow we'll have another one on synchronous online learning, and then Thursday on mastery grading and building a syllabus. So we hope you're able to attend those as well. If not, that's fine, because we will be offering some recordings on MAA Connect. And we also encourage you to continue the conversation on MAA Connect and continue to engage with your colleagues around these issue areas. That was the main purpose, that we want to be sure to have a sense of community around all of the trending issues in math education. So we have an amazing panel for everyone today who is going to give an introduction to IBL and ways to implement that virtually or online. So without further ado, thanks again for joining. And Nina, I'll kick it off to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to the MAA for inviting us to do this today. We're really excited to be here. It's a little humbling to see this audience and see some really amazing experts here watching this today. So we are gonna give you lots of opportunities to learn from each other. So the recording policy is up here. There were questions about that. It will be recorded and it will be available. Yeah, next slide, Matt. Okay, so I'm going to give an introduction, and I'll start with the outline of what we're going to do. I'm going to be giving an overview of who we are today in this virtual room and what is IBL. It's going to be a kind of conceptual framework that we're going to build on then with examples. Robin is going to lead us through some video case studies, and we're going to really push the technology and actually have you leave the webinar in order to go into some breakout rooms. So we have our fingers crossed that everything works out there. And then Matt is going to take over and share some examples of course structures of online IBL courses, and then also take us through a kind of crowdsourced Q&A, which we're calling challenges and solutions. Oh, and I should say also that IBL is the acronym we'll use for inquiry-based learning. So that's what we'll be using throughout. The goal today is going to be that you leave with a definition of IBL that is conceptual enough that you can really apply it to many different settings, and that it can help you envision and plan for your fall courses. We won't be presenting or advocating for certain tools because this depends so much on your institution and your students, but some of these tools will come up naturally in what you'll see and what we'll talk about. But really this goal is this definition and this framework to help you make instructional decisions. So we're going to give you a brief introduction to who we are. So I am Nina White. Welcome to my office, my home gym, my linen closet, my guest bedroom. There's lots of things going on here in this room. I am a lecturer at University of Michigan. I help my colleagues think about IBL teaching, and I also help college math instructors all over the country think about IBL teaching when I'm a facilitator for the Academy for Inquiry-Based Learning workshops, which we held earlier this summer. And a fun fact about me is that I live on a farm and we have like 3,000 chickens.
Hi, I'm Robin Wilson. I'm at Cal Poly Pomona. I've been here since about 2007. I'm going to be teaching fully online coming up in the fall. And I'm going to also be teaching fully synchronous lectures through Zoom. I have 2 sections of abstract algebra, and I'm also going to be coordinating calculus for a bunch of instructors that are also going online for the first time. And it's our first time taking an effort to coordinate the courses. So that's some of what's going on at home for me. I've been working with the Academy of Inquiry-Based Learning for about 3 years now, 2 summers plus a little extra. And I'm going to pass it over to Matt.
Yeah, hi, I'm Matt Jones. I am the math department chair at Cal State Dominguez Hills here in Southern California. Yeah, I've been using IBL since before this year's incoming freshmen were walking the earth, so quite a while, I guess. And you know, welcome to my home. If you look carefully, you can probably spot a lot of Legos that my daughter and I occupy our time with when we're not on Zoom. So welcome.
Okay, and now Grace is going to close the poll and we're going to share the results and see a little bit of who is here with us all today. Okay, so hopefully you can all scroll through these. So overwhelmingly, as was observed, we have a lot of college and university instructors. A lot of people are teaching more than I expected in some kind of high flex or hybrid situation, about equal with 100% online. A lot of people are teaching in the calculus sequence, but we have a pretty good spread across a lot of different math classes and also some non-mathematics. And the plurality for experience with IBL is tried a little bit. So about a quarter of the people here have not tried it at all. But then we also have 15% who have used IBL for more than 6 semesters. Okay, so that's a little bit about who you all are that you can look through. You can close it whenever you want. Is everyone able to see those results in front of them? Hopefully. Yes, great. Thank you for the chat feedback. I appreciate it. Okay, so besides acknowledging who we all are, I also want to acknowledge when we are all living right now. Can you bring up the next slide, Matt? So we are living in a global pandemic that is also a backdrop to a national and even international call to recognize and dismantle racism, especially anti-Black racism. And this time in history affects all of us, but it doesn't affect all of us equally. It affects our students in our classrooms, and it affects our community here today, and we are not separate from that. So we won't explicitly be addressing either of these big forces today, but we're not going to pretend like they don't exist. Okay, so we are a community living in this as our students are, and we can't separate ourselves from that. Can you go on to the next slide, Matt? So we've foreshadowed that this will be very interactive. So here are some of the ways you'll be able to participate. So first of all, we created a tiny URL, which maybe someone could also drop that in the chat window. This tiny URL is going to take you to a Google Doc. Oops, not yet. Can you go back? Yeah. So this tiny URL will also take you to a Google Doc, and lots of links are going to be there for you to use throughout the webinar today. The chat window, as you are all using it already, is for you to kind of communicate amongst yourselves. Make sure your chat is set to all panelists and attendees. There's also a Q&A where you can direct questions specifically for me, Matt, and Robin. But we're also going to have a crowdsourced Q&A at the end, so questions might be punted there, or you're also going to have lots of opportunities to ask questions. Thank you, Keenan, for dropping that URL in there. Next slide. So there's also some invitations that I want to provide here for this space because we'll be interacting so much. So first of all, these are things for us to keep in mind, that if we listen to be engaged and to be changed, it's more effective than listening to poke holes. Like, I know mathematicians love to poke holes, but I think the listening we do today is going to be more effective if we're listening to learn and be changed. We also, like I've mentioned, you're eventually going to be in breakout rooms, and so sharing the space is really important. I can hopefully count on you all to help kind of keep this norm in action. So if you're noticing in a breakout room that you're not hearing from someone, reach out and ask them what they're thinking. And also keep in mind the way that these interactions can interact with privilege in these spaces, sometimes without us being aware of it. And then finally, expect messiness. You're not going to leave here with the answer to every question that you've ever had. We expect our students to deal with some messiness and a resolution, if that's a word. And so we'll also be asking that of you today. And these are adapted from my colleague, Brian Katz. Can you go to the next slide, Matt? Okay, so now, Okay, there's a technical issue that I'm going to have Robin or Matt try to deal with in the background in the chat that you can see. I'm going to ask everyone else to take a minute. And so here's what's important. Type in the chat window, but do not press enter yet. So what productive actions do you take when faced with something truly difficult for you? So this could be a math problem. This could be a whole new area of math, or it could be something non-mathematical altogether. So we're going to take 30 seconds to type, just silently, but do not press enter yet. So I forgot to set an actual timer. So in my head, a 30-second timer is now going off. So go ahead and press enter. Whoa, so many answers. Okay, so take a moment to scroll through some of these. Take a break. I see that. I see a bunch of take a breaks. Break it down into smaller steps. Talk to a colleague. Talk to someone else. Guess and check. Write down what I already know. Look up resources. Oh my goodness, they just keep going. There's so many. Okay, so there's so many awesome things here. Go ahead and scroll through and listen. Take a look at these. What I want to point out is these are some of the strategies we're trying to help our students learn. We're trying to help them learn how to recognize when something is hard, how to struggle productively, and how to find strategies and actually have the metacognition to know when they're learning and growing and succeeding. Okay, so in IBL, instead of asking them to do all of this outside of class on their homework by themselves, we're actually asking them to do this in class where we can help support them and help them build this kind of metacognition and these strategies. So can you go to the next slide, Matt? So here's one kind of possible definition of IBL. Form of active learning in which students engage in the practices of mathematicians: sense making, proving, example exploration, conjecture making, revising, listening, sharing, collaborating, persevering, and facing uncertainty. And these kinds of things, they take time to build this. These are difficult skills. This is a fine definition, but it doesn't really tell us what it looks like, and that's actually intentional. IBL can take many forms. We like to say that it's big tent. Matt, can you go to the next slide? So another way to define IBL is by what's known as the 4 pillars that were introduced by Larson and Rasmussen in 2019. So these pillars are that students engage deeply with coherent and meaningful mathematical tasks. Students collaboratively process mathematical ideas. Instructors inquire into student thinking, and instructors foster equity in their design and facilitation choices. And this is the kind of framework and definition that we're going to use throughout today to help us think about what IBL looks like and why it can take so many different forms. Because if you take a moment to think about this framework, this could exist online, this could exist in a high school classroom, this can exist asynchronously, this could exist face-to-face. So these kind of 4 core principles or pillars are what help us think about IBL in all these different contexts. And this grid presentation of these I attribute to TJ Hitchman, who kind of presented it to me this way for the first time, where we can kind of think about it as the mathematical and social space and the students and instructors. Okay, I want to dig in a little bit more into the equity pillar in particular, because sometimes that can be the hardest one to like see and pin down. So on one hand, active learning and IBL, there's some research that supports that they lead to more equitable results, or they can narrow achievement gaps. This is a recent article by Freeman et al. And there's also research by Sandra Larson. In our resources, we have a nice video linked that Sandra Larson made about these results. Sandra's research looked specifically, or found results specifically about women. However, the thing we want to emphasize is that equity is not an automatic outcome of IBL or other forms of active learning. So this quote is from the Freeman article. Meaningful reductions in achievement gaps only occur when course designs combine deliberate practice with inclusive teaching. So this is a pillar that doesn't just happen because of the other three, but it's actually one that we need to focus on. So why is it not automatic? This is a quote that I think is very thought-provoking that Deborah Ball gave in a speech plenary lecture in 2019. So classrooms that are rich in discourse and discussion are crucial for empowering young people. They are also high risk for reproducing patterns of racism and marginalization. So that is everything that happens outside of our classroom also exists inside of our classroom. So when we have power structures and racism and sexism outside the classroom, it also exists inside of our classroom. Okay, so what can we do about that? So I want to think a little bit more asset-minded here instead of deficit-minded. We're going to be talking about IBL instruction online today. So let's think about equity online. So I think we've been thinking a lot about online instruction as a barrier. We know that students have differential access to technology and internet, so that's definitely a barrier to equity. But I think that there are also features of it that can be an asset. So here's one way it can be an asset, and just an idea I want to put out there before I kind of turn this over to the next part is, so this is an idea from Daniel Reinholz at San Diego State University. He gave a nice plenary lecture about this for one of our AIBL workshops. So online instruction allows for diverse modalities of participation. So for example, being vocal in class, but also typing in the chat window, also participating in an asynchronous discussion board. And a lot of my colleagues have found that the kind of students who raise their hand and talk in class are not the same ones who see discussion boards or who are really active in the chat. And so we're actually, online instruction can allow more students to participate meaningfully. But when more students participate, then it also can allow more opportunities for us to see and acknowledge those contributions and that competence. And so I would just point you to one small piece of the literature about equitable instruction called Assigning Competence. And when we use this as a tool to kind of elevate certain students' ideas, this can actually allow us to kind of disrupt patterns of marginalization and power in our classrooms. So it's kind of a, this is a beginning of an answer to Deborah Ball's concern, and it's a practice that she advocates for a lot in her work with future teachers. So that's kind of just putting that out there a little bit before we branch into these videos. I'm going to turn it over now to Robin.
So thank you, Nina, for that framing. I think that was really well done. So now we're going to switch to looking at some examples of what IBL looks like and what IBL looks like online. And so all of these classroom clips are from instructors whose classes went online in the middle of the semester last spring. And I think several of the videos happened pretty shortly after that switch occurred. So we're going to watch these 3 short clips. As I mentioned, they all taught synchronous virtual courses this spring, and each video shows slightly different ways of engaging with students in an online setting. And so when you watch the videos, think about where and how you see these 4 pillars show up in the videos. And so we'll put those pillars on the screen again for you in just a second. Can you go to the next slide? All right. So I want to point out also, I just put the Hub document in the chat for you guys one more time. And also in the Hub document is a link to transcripts for all 3 of these videos. And so some things to keep in mind when watching the videos is that it's important to put on our field research killers. So which means think about these things from kind of a field researcher lens, where you want to avoid overanalyzing or overgeneralizing about students and instructors from these short clips. There's a lot that we don't see in these videos that's happening both in and out of the classroom. Try not to focus on the math content. I know for some of us it's hard, but instead try to focus on the student-teacher and those student-to-student interactions. All these instructors are very competent, but they're also new to online teaching. And so while these clips aren't perfect, they are examples of what interactive online instruction can look like. And so we hope that you'll get something from them. Matt, can you move up to the next slide? Okay, thanks. So there's those 4 pillars: deep engagement, enriched mathematics, opportunities to collaborate, inquiry into student thinking, and fostering an equitable environment for learning. I'm going to put these in the chat for you all as well, so you can have them in front of you while we're watching these videos. So we want you to keep in mind how you see these pillars arise in the short video clips, and also think about something you notice and something you wonder. Our last video is from our very own Nina White, and this was the class that she taught this spring.
There was a lot of
Geometry for elementary teachers. I guess this was her winter term, and I think the video took place shortly after things went online. She wanted to mention that she had a particularly bad internet day that day, so no one was using video, only the voice, and the iPad is screen sharing. And so the context for the video is that students were tasked with interpreting and extending the work of a hypothetical child. And one student's filling out of the child's strategy was preloaded onto class slides, and it's being examined by the whole class. But Nina's the one who's sharing the video. So I think we're ready, Matt. While you're pressing play, remember to keep those 4 pillars in mind and jot down something that you notice and a question you have about something that you wonder.
Problem 9. There was a lot of interesting work here. So here was an example of this being solved. Take a minute to look at this solution and see if you have any questions about it. See if you can make sense of where all the different numbers here come from. Okay, so can somebody either by unmuting themselves or typing in the chat box explain where this 3 by 2 equals 6 comes from? It's a little hard to see the colors maybe. Nicole says it's this rectangle segment here. Okay, so this 3 by 2 corresponds to this 3 by 2 rectangle that we got by this dissection. Okay, and then this solution here is actually not quite the typical solution, so this may be a little different than some of you did it. Where did this 3 by 2 come from? Someone other than Nicole. Oh, and I see lots of other answers here from Emily and Sarah. Thank you. So what about this second kind of black 3 by 2? Where do people think that came from? The area of the left triangle. Yeah, I agree. So because then she goes on to say 3 by 2 is, and then she takes her 6 and divides it by 2 to get 3. So I agree that I think that is supposed to represent, let me draw some arrows here, that this 3 by 2, that's not very dark, let me make this a little thicker, that this 3 by 2 is corresponding to this, and then this 3 by 2 and the division by 2, I think, is supposed to correspond to that triangle there. And then lastly, the last one then, this 3 by 1 and the 3 divided by 2 equals 1.5 would correspond to this last triangle here. Okay, so what do people think about this solution, these 3 parts like this? Did everybody do it the same way? Or let me write briefly a different way that I saw a lot of people do it, and then I want to see if we can think about what the difference between these are. So a lot of people, instead of splitting it up into 2 triangles, just had 1 triangle and listed this as 3 times 3 divided by 2 equals 4.5. Yeah, so Savon, exactly. So basically the same thing, but didn't split it up. Yeah. Yeah, so I like what Savon is suggesting, that it's a little simpler. What else, why else would we want to keep it together instead of splitting it up? Yeah, so Amy is pointing out that if we split it up, we don't actually, let me erase this so we can see what was under there originally. Don't actually know that these individual bases are 2 and 1. We might judge, kind of looking at it, that they look like 2 and 1, but we don't actually know the individual bases of the 2 smaller triangles. Okay, so the way that Savannah is suggesting to kind of do it all together as one big triangle, we do know that this base would be 3 because it was 5 and we took out 2, but we don't know what these individual ones would be. And also Sarah points out that Morgan squished it together in her pictures, so that's also a good reason why we should think of this as like one big triangle. Yeah, so as Amy's saying, the sum of these bases are 3, but the individual pieces we don't actually know. Does that make sense? So the idea here of kind of cutting it up and computing those areas totally makes sense. We would just want to be a little careful in these 2 pieces that we don't actually know those 2 bases individually.
Okay, so thank you, Matt. So that was the last of the 3 examples. Right now, we're going to give you a few more moments, one last time, to write down some thoughts about the video. There's notice and wonders and connections with the 4 pillars. And then we're going to switch gears to a collaborative activity. Okay, so I think we're ready to move on to our discussion about the videos that Nina mentioned is kind of pushing the limits of this technology because we can't get to breakout rooms from the webinar. So we're going to have to leave the webinar into 3 different Zoom meetings so we can use the breakout rooms. I'll let Matt explain how this is going to work.
Sure, yeah, so we have set up, we just split it up by birthdays. So if you go to the hub document one more time, you'll see we have it, the year split into thirds. So January through April, May through August, and then September through December. Each have 3 different Zoom meeting rooms. And again, that's because of the limitations of the technology and where we can do breakout rooms and how many people can be there to do it. And then under each of those links, you will see separate Google Sheet tabs because Google Sheets also have limits on how many people can be on there at a time. And so you will find your meeting link and underneath it, your Google Sheet link. So go navigate to those 2 things. The presenters will get in there as soon as we can. And then we will send you into breakout rooms in there where you get a chance to actually maybe turn on your video and have a live face-to-face discussion with some other folks here. Use the expertise in the room to collect your reflections on the video. Okay, so when that is over, I just want to note that you'll then use the hub document to return to this webinar. We've dropped a link in there that should work. If for some reason the link doesn't get you back here, you may need to go to your email to get the link to the webinar, just as a backup, okay? Okay, and again, the questions are these ones that we gave you for What did you notice or wonder about the video clips? Which of the 4 pillars were you able to observe? And then you're just going to record your thoughts on the spreadsheet for your birth month. Okay, so we will see you all in those breakout rooms shortly. Any questions before we run out?
Okay. Good luck, everyone. See you in the next room.
I was just going to draw out a few of the things. So this is from my room, some of the things that people saw. Nina, by the way, did a great job of setting up this amazing Google Sheet that collects ideas from individual groups down here into a single tab where it's pulling your responses together. So just to highlight a couple of things. So here's from video 1. This group saw clear evidence of the first 3 pillars, spent time discussing evidence for the equity pillar. Yeah, and I agree. And the first video is Katz's video, right? It's hard to get from that little 5-minute snippet, you know, to have a clear understanding of, you know, what his equity moves might have been, either to set up who was participating or, you know, other things that may have happened in that session or other sessions. But I acknowledge it. That's a good observation. Here's another one, engaged in the math. So was aware of something that may not have been correct, something they don't know. So yeah, so in that video, right, the students were clearly asking for guidance about some of the mathematics that they set up. Okay, I will go pop up a couple of these other ones. So video 2, a couple people got some thoughts down. So students felt comfortable discussing the problem with each other, so there were opportunities to collaborate. Equitable environment, so giving time, right, there was wait time while the students created their own examples, right, and then they, that can be done in different ways. In this case, we saw one student actually put his notebook right up to the screen, or actually 2 students maybe did that. So those are good thoughts. Okay, so I hope that those videos were valuable and that whether you were able to get your thoughts into the chat or not, that you had some good discussions. I know, at least in some of the rooms I visited, that was happening. So I am going to stop sharing for just a second. And we're going to shift into some new.
Can I add, Matt, that people, everybody can access all of those sheets. So you can look across also and kind of see what other groups noticed. And those links at the end are kind of compilations across the groups. So yeah, we won't have time to dig into them too deeply, but they are all there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, so I'm back on our slides. And so what I want to do, just for a couple of minutes, I know at least at one point a question came up about how to do things asynchronously. And so what we did is we put together 6 cases. The first 3 or course structures, sort of examples of online courses and how they are being run or were run. So the first 3 are the 3 that you saw in the videos. So it gives you a little more detail about how they were operating. And then you'll see there are 3 more down below those. So if you go to the hub again, there is a link for course structures. And then in there, there is a table of contents on the first page. It's hyperlinked to the 6 different example courses. I want to give people just a minute to navigate over there, kind of browse it for just a bit. We will stay silent and just kind of watch the chat for a bit while you have a chance to look at those, think about how what's there might apply to what's in your courses, and then think of questions or challenges, because what we're doing in the last segment is open another sheet up where you can raise questions or challenges that you have, and then we will all try to respond to each other, because we know there's a lot of expertise, not just amongst the panelists, but amongst all of you out there participating. Okay, so I'm being quiet while you look at course structures for a bit.
And Nina and Matt, we've got some questions over in the Q&A already.
Got it. Thank you. I'll work on those while people look at that course structures document that Matt shared.
Nina and Matt, it's possible we may need to screen share the examples of online course structures. It looks like we've got a couple people saying that it's unavailable due to heavy traffic on the file.
Okay.
Okay, I think we should actually leave that probably for people to explore on their own. We knew that we couldn't have too many people editing, but we thought we could have more people viewing. What's there, we can just describe it, are 5 kind of examples of how people either ran their courses in the winter or plan to run them. Oh, 6, sorry, there's 6 of them. And it's just giving you some more examples. We saw some snippets of real-time, like not in person, but some real-time small sections of class. But if you want to think of the kind of overarching structure of what a week or semester might look like, that is what is there.
Yeah, and so what we want to do is kind of pivot off of that so we can spend a little bit of time giving you a chance to just bring up your own challenges. So once again, what we're going to do is we've got 3 Google Sheets set up. We split it into thirds. Hopefully that will reduce the traffic on each of the individual sheets. But we want to encourage you to go there. And I'm going to go ahead and try to share it with you so you can see just how it's organized. Okay, so if you're looking at this, if you come to this sheet, it's got different tabs that have different sort of areas of concern that you might have or challenges that you might be facing. So the tabs building community, student presentations, group work, technology, assessment, asynchronous work, other, right? So go to a tab that kind of fits what you're thinking about, or go to the other tab if none of them fit well, and then go ahead. Down the left column, you can type in the concerns that you have. And then once you've gotten a couple of things out there, then we encourage you to pivot over and try responding to some folks with what they raise. Drop your own answers sort of in the same row so that, you know, a concern is on the row 2, then you would put your own response in the column next to it. Okay, and as questions and concerns come in, we will be monitoring what's there, maybe verbalizing some of it, and also trying to type in to some of these things as well. And I guess I should say, if that's not working for you, we can also try to keep the Q&A window open and respond that way if we need to, if that's the only way you can get a question out there.
And Matt, maybe you mentioned this, but hopefully everyone noticed there are actually 3 sheets. Again, it's sorted by your birthday, and that's to limit the traffic. And you can focus on asking questions or focus on answering questions. Like Matt has emphasized, there's so much expertise in this audience here. So if you're asking questions in the Q&A, maybe pivot to asking them in the sheet, because there have been so many questions about asynchronous. And so I think that would be a great place to start kind of compiling some answers together in one of those asynchronous tabs.
So I'm so sorry. The person who came in with Robin's name, I think the actual Robin Wilson is trying to get in with that same link and is unable to, as you used his link to get in. Could you please exit out and come back in with the original link that was sent to you from Zoom when you registered for the webinar? All right, I'm going to go ahead and make you an attendee then, and I'll try to get Robin back in here with a different email address.
So I just want to acknowledge that people are putting in great questions, and I see a lot of very thoughtful responses popping in as well.
Matt, I've been focusing on the first sheet. I'm going to move to the 3rd sheet.
Okay.
It looks like the 3rd sheet's got plenty going on.
Yeah, there seem to be a lot of people. Yay for the last third of the year birthdays.
One thing, I'm going to vocalize some of what I'm seeing. There's been questions about asynchronous work coming up in the Q&A a lot. Flipgrid has been mentioned. So Flipgrid is a video technology where students record themselves and then other students can interact with those recordings and give comments and things like that. So you can still maintain some of the like in-person feeling with something like Flipgrid, or I think it's called Voice Stream is another one that maybe costs money. Some learning management systems support videos themselves within the discussion thread. So it depends on which learning management system you have and which tools it has integrated with it. There are things called video quizzes that some learning management systems have, which is a way to have students engage more directly with recorded lectures, where there's pause points built into the lectures that ask them formative questions. So it's not just accountability, it's actually making sure they stop and engage. There's also been questions that came up about technology and access to technology, like shouldn't we all be doing asynchronous? And I know that some institutions require that. I've met with some colleagues who were required absolutely to do asynchronous. But I think it starts with finding out what technology your students have. Different institutions, different subsections of students have different access. And so a technology survey to find out what your students have is really important, and then to be able to make your design decisions accordingly. So I at least had one student with very bad internet, but she and I were able to work out a plan so that she could still participate as much as all of the other students. So like one thing I did is their group work actually happened outside of class, so they could do it like over FaceTime together. And that's something that she could do on her phone. And then if someone was unable to attend the synchronous part, that was recorded, and so that students could go back and watch that. Matt or Robin, do you want to highlight some of the responses you're seeing here? Building community is huge in sheet number 2.
Yeah, I'm seeing it on sheet number 3 as well. So one of the things that I mentioned actually, in a quick response, I typed into asynchronous strategy, but also works here, is setting up permanent groups. So normally with my students, when I make groups, they are done in class and it will change from day to day. And I still do that synchronously in Zoom, but I also had students sort of set up in partnerships or small groups work together outside of class. And I've heard of other instructors doing this also, where they're kind of long-term groups that you ask them to check in with each other. Nina, I think you did something a little bit like that, right? Where you had students sort of asking to meet on their own, separate from the whole class, right?
Yeah, I did that. But I mean, the winter semester was very different than fall will be because my students knew each other in person already.
Yep. Well, we have just a few minutes. Do we want to pivot to doing a little bit of wrap up?
Yeah. I think all these questions people are bringing up are really, really good. And I think there's a lot of really good responses here too. I want to remember one of our invitations from the beginning, which was that we can expect messiness. This is a challenging situation, and we're facing that challenge head on. And hopefully it's also an opportunity. Like I'm hoping some of my colleagues who really just did straight lecture before, when they move to online, might feel uncomfortable just talking at a screen full of students. And so maybe this is actually a chance for us to rethink some of the choices we're making and how to engage our students more. And like I mentioned also, it's an opportunity to engage students in more ways because there's more modalities in online teaching. So I think a mix of synchronous and asynchronous might be very ideal for a lot of people. Can you go to the next slide, Matt? So just a quick look back at what we did today, and then I'm going to ask you to pivot to the chat again. Oh, there's a question about a technology survey. There's many of them online. Like if you Google technology survey, most of them are for high schools, but you can find other ones. What did we do today? So we saw the 4 pillars definition of IBL. If you're feeling overwhelmed, I would encourage you to go back to that definition to think about how you can implement each of those pillars. Then we saw videos of IBL teaching moments online, and you discussed those in breakout rooms. We briefly saw, although that document got overloaded, some examples of IBL course structures, which were mostly synchronous and also mostly small. That's what we had access to from our colleagues, but there are opportunities for larger courses, for asynchronous courses. So I am aware that that was a narrower slice than it could have been. And then finally, we started to address some challenges and solutions. There's a lot of challenges, but there's also a lot of solutions. So for our final kind of reflection, I want to do another type into the chat window. I think there's another slide for this, Matt. One thing that you will take away from today for thinking about your fall courses. So that doesn't necessarily mean a direct translation of something you saw in a video, but like anything that you kind of got out of today. So take 30 seconds to type it. Don't hit enter. I want everyone to have the empty chat window there for a minute while they think and type. Okay, go ahead and hit enter. And I will also put out a short solicitation here that if you are running a large class or an asynchronous class and you have a course structure in mind, like we would be happy to add to that document. That document is not static, it could be added to. So please contact one of us if you would like us to add your course structure to that document. Okay, take a scroll through these. I'm also gonna scroll through these, and the chat is also saved and will be part of the recording. Awesome. Since we have 1 minute left, I want to go to the last slide really quick instead of vocalizing these. Can you go to that, Matt? This is a very short list of resources. There's so many more resources out there. I wanted to draw your attention to a video. We didn't get into the research on IBL teaching at all, but there's a really nice video that Sandra Larson made recently with a summary of that. And Kiara put this out there at the beginning, but MAA Connect is a great resource, and there's a community on online teaching and distance learning. There's some general IBL advice in a really short AMS article. It's not online specific, but the ideas of it translate well online. I put the citation for the original definition of the 4 pillars, the website for the Academy of Inquiry-Based Learning. I mentioned this practice of assigning competence, and so I put 1 citation for that. And then also a very short document from the AMS and TIPSY on kind of general good practices for teaching online, whether it's IBL or not, in terms of transparency of structure and patience with our students and flexibility and things like that. So again, the hub has a link to these slides. So these and these references are all linked. And again, please email us if you have course structures that you would like us to add to this document. I think
we will leave all the, like the hub document, like we're not going to disassemble all those things. So those can be resources that you can come back to when we're done here. Yeah, I mean, there were just more great ideas than we could keep up with.
Thank you all for attending.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.